is.
is, now, and shall be.
You can't help but smile when you hear that whole cascade of names that comes at you out of the Old Testament. I mean, I was standing there thinking, what if I would stand up and say, and Georg Adam was the father, was the son, was the father of Georg, and Georg was the father of Adam, and Adam was the father of Matilda, and Matilda was the wife of Norman, and Norman was the father of Gabriel. It's like, who cares? It's like, whoa. So what? But people cared in the time of Jesus. And though we smile at this cascade of names today, there's some really heavy-duty hitters in this list of people. There are kings in this list. I mean, we got David as the biggie, of course, coming down through the line. And we have Ruth jumps into this in some places. Ruth is an outsider, so the reason why she gets included into genealogies is to show that the gospel is not just for Jews. That's the first reason why you get things like this. But this whole katina, this waterfall of names that comes at us, is just so foreign to our consciousness today. But you know what? In the time in which it was said, it was really important for people because it proved that Jesus was Jewish. I mean, that was a difficult thing at the time. There were people who tried to push him outside of the framework of the faith. There were people who said that he was really basically a kind of rebel, a revolutionary, a heretic, whatever. And whoever compiled that genealogy was trying to say, he's the genuine article, man. He comes out of a long history of people who've been called by God to be the light in the world. So there's that side of it. And then do you notice, well, you really don't when you hear this gospel chanted. You really don't hear that there's like a break between the first part and the second part. You go through the end of the genealogy and you get to Joseph. Well, and Pani said last night, in her typical fashion, Pani said, hey, how come this genealogy works out like it does, and it comes down to Joseph, and Joseph is not Jesus' father? And I said, well, it's because he was his legal father. According to the rules at the time in Israel, Joseph became, in essence, the adopted father. And it's so like if you happen to be adopted, you're going to inherit what your parents have, despite the fact that you're an adopted child and not a natural one. So that's not really an issue for this particular gospel. So it ends with that genealogy with Jesus. But then, did you notice that break? Then it starts up again. And it says, now, the birth of Jesus happened in this particular way. And then you got the angels, you got the bells and whistles, you got everything that comes with it that tries to tell us that Jesus is not the train coming by. Do we get that all the time? That's usually 10:30, right? Cool.
Bells and whistles.
I like it. Yeah, bells and whistles. There you have it. Right. Sorry. In any case, the second half of this gospel really picks up on another thing. And that's to prove to us that Jesus was really human. That sounds goofy to us these days. We think, what else could he have been? He was a Jewish guy. He had to be human, right? But by the 3rd century of the church, there was a huge movement. A huge movement. I mean, it almost took over the church in the 3rd and 4th centuries. A huge movement that said he wasn't really human. He was like a hologram of God that showed up on earth. He wasn't really human. And so there had to be a lot of time spent in the church proving that Jesus had both feet on the ground. That he had ribs and a heart. That he had hands like other people. Because there was actually this incredibly big movement that said he wasn't that at all. He was a phantom. He was like a ghost who showed up and he looked like a human being, but he wasn't really. And all this because people move away from the idea that God and humanity could be somehow put together, could somehow come together. It had been promised to Israel. It had been lived out by Israel. Israel was the incarnation of God in the world. But then there was this person who came along, who in his life somehow merges, if you will, divinity and humanity. And that's what people couldn't buy. They couldn't buy that we, with all of the guts and the blood and the skin that we've got, that we could somehow or another be vehicles of God in the world. And as I've said before, I love the passage in Hebrews where it says that Jesus was the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. What more could you possibly ask for? He is the pioneer for us because in him, the ability to live the life of God becomes manifest and promises to us that same possibility, that we might live in that way. You know, it's like a mantra in Orthodoxy. We talk about theosis, about, becoming, God became human in order that humans might become divine. Well, not the essence of God, of course, but that we might demonstrate what divinity really means. And what it means is compassion. It means kindness. It means living for others. It means taking care of the poor who are in your midst. It means all those things. Because it is a continuation of the divinity that is within the Hebrew people. That divinity that says so many times in the Old Testament, you got to take care of the orphan, the widow, and the stranger who's in your midst. That's how you demonstrate that divinity. And that's, of course, what Christ did. He came to us, and look at the Beatitudes that we just sang. They're all about that. Look at his life, the way in which he dealt with people. And finally, of course, look at his cross, because that becomes the ultimate emblem, if you will, of his sacrificial willingness to bring the presence of God into the human realm. A task that we are tasked with as well, in our own minimal kind of small fashion, not quite like Christ himself, of course, but nonetheless, to be mediators of that love in this world. That's what I'm called to. I know I'm imperfect. I'm an imperfect representation of God in this world. And we look at Jesus and we say that he is the perfect incarnation of God in this world. All the rest of us are kind of broken. But nonetheless, we're called to demonstrate that with the best of our ability, to the best of our ability, to each other, beginning with our own families, beginning with those whom we know, beginning with those whom we don't know, moving out into the world and taking this message. The genealogy is really fun. It's really an interesting thing that nails Jesus into the Jewish people. But the story of his birth nails him into humanity and calls upon us to live in a similar fashion. Christ is in our midst.
Yes,